Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back to the show. We are honored to have Venerable joining us today, and got to say Happy New Year to you, to all of our listeners and viewers, really starting the new year off right. And I know we have some inspiration from someone who is so humble, so kind, a professional of the year, and who always is here to enlighten and embrace. So what's new for you in 2026, Grant? What can we expect?
What's new for me is really looking at history, which I haven't really looked at some of the chunks that I wanted to take up here, but things that are not widely recognized as what causes the experiences and events that we have today. And some of them are concerning to people, some are not concerning, but it's an opportunity for me to really bring together all of the fields, about 4 fields of interest to me over the span of my lifetime and moving into 2026 and beyond. And looking back at my own childhood, I was raised religiously in the Methodist Church, and then things started from there. But the bottom line of that was community. And the community really started in religion. It started with hunter-gatherer groups and trying to figure out where did we come from as human beings, and that's how religion developed. Well, so that's one of my interests, is religion. The other interest is science. I got involved with the planetarium in Los Angeles, one of the most important scientific structures in the United States. And it isn't that it's the greatest observatory anywhere else in the country, but it was developed by the city of Los Angeles and the founding fathers and mothers of Los Angeles to have a place where they could educate their youth in terms of their relationship to the whole universe. And a planetarium is a theater. It's a dome theater. It's very much like the domes we have in our religious temples. No matter what the religion, the dome feature seems to be the center of it all. And as a small child, I was entranced by this great big screen in the Los Angeles planetarium, the Zeit. I'm trying to think of its name. It's a great big projector. It looks like a huge metallic ant. The structure of an ant, except it's like 20 feet across. And this thing sits in the middle of the room, and it has an operator there, and there's an announcer there. And the seating is circular, and so that the whole dome is a screen of the nearby solar system and the far out beyond the solar system to the universe. And these seats, the theater seating, you could sit back and look up at the big dome screen, and you have other people in there with you. There's children in there, adults in there, and it's a thrill to see the planets. Well, how it starts is with the sunset, and so we're sitting there, and the room goes dark, and then around the edges of the room, just above the seating where you're seated, the sunrise begins in this great dome theater, and it gets lighter and lighter. And well, actually, I'm doing it backward because it starts out in the dark. We go, and then the sun sets, and it gets darker and darker, and the stars begin to come out. first a few, and then a lot of them, till you're looking at what the universe looks like. If you're out on a desert and there are no intruding lights around, that always caught my attention as a little child. It
Yeah.
captured, it predefined my whole relationship to the universe.
Yeah.
That this is something I could feel it. If there's
Yeah.
a creator, this is what the creator did. This is what the creator is
Uh-huh.
about. Make me aware of this beautiful panorama. And then the operator, the announcer of the performance goes into more detail about where did the solar system come from
Yeah.
and the phases of the moon and
Oh,
then particular stars and constellations. So I thought I'd start with that, which was
absolutely.
about the last thing that I was thinking about. But what is striking is that this beautiful planetarium building at the top of Griffith Park Hill, the LA Basin, you can't see the San Fernando Valley, but you can see the LA Basin stretching out to the harbor 25, 30 miles south. You can see it all the way to the beach around Santa Monica, which is just 20 miles away. And then the skyscrapers, the lights of Los Angeles. I want to use a term to get us going because I have determined really that that's the whole determinant that shaped life today on planet Earth, particularly life in the United States, which seems to be in a chaotic condition. Actually, it's not. Actually, the United States is in wonderful condition, but there's illusions that have been created for us to buy into if we fall for it. And I have not fallen for it because my deep scientific training and liberal arts education gives me powerful ability in critical thinking so that I'm constantly, even from childhood, asking the right questions, whatever the question was concerning. If people are worried about the economy, if they're worried about where they're going to live the following year, they're worried about their lives, they're worried about things happening they don't understand. All of that is taken care of because we picked up this backward notion in the Western world, which started out like gangbusters with great discoveries like Galileo discovering at least 5 moons revolving around the planet Jupiter with his little telescope. That was back in 1610. It was a little while ago, but that set the tone for scientific discovery by not only the Western world, but as far away as China and Africa and indigenous peoples of the Americas who had ways of studying the skies, the universe. All were acquainted with eclipses, where the light would be shut off. We'd be enter several minutes of night, just black darkness. And scientifically, we didn't know at first what that was about. Now we know it's when the moon blocks off the light of the sun. Now, I want to go back to something I've touched on before on the origin of Western civilization, which I mostly read about and educated myself about by reading books, encyclopedias. My parents had provided their children with the Book of Knowledge, which was one of the very well-known, attractive scientific encyclopedias at the time of my childhood and teenage, and then came the Encyclopedia Britannica. What good was all of this? The good is that I began to discern the basic elements of Western civilization, which were religious in their founding. Religion was an obvious no-brainer at the time. People concluded, well, there's a creator here somewhere. We may not know its name or what it looks like, and people had different names for what they call the creator. And the creator has been through different stages of popularity and unpopularity. And as the secular society came about, creator became less popular, and people would not pursue the ideas and the visions of the creator as much as they did in what we call ancient biblical times. But as far as my life is indicated, that creator or creative energy is still present, even more than ever than in biblical times, when people thought that they could recognize miracles. And as we got more secular, all secular really refers to is whatever life is in a particular time. And as life got away from formal religion, whether it was in China, Japan, India, Europe, or the United States, South America, they got detached from the scriptural components, foundations of religion, which the elders of before year one, before year one, AD, year of our Lord, or CE, the Common Era. Before that was BC, before the Common Era. People tended to be more what we call religious then. They went to worship centers on a regular basis to renew their relationship to the Creator. And while the faithful news media is fond of pointing out that people don't go to houses of worship much anymore. And in England, the United Kingdom, they hardly go at all, or at least that's the impression that's put out. However, there is a tradition that's still going on, and I want to call it the Jerusalem Temple. The Jerusalem Temple was the whole basis of Western civilization. I'm going to be so bold as to say, without the Jerusalem Temple and its knowledge content, its content in which it celebrated connection to a creator or a creative force, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter. But that was the start of everything in the Western world, including and especially the first thing of interest was education. And the news media is fond of giving rise to this bandwagon belief that, oh, the schools are failing. Education is in bad shape. You say that enough times on the air, on the radio, the television, guess what happens? People start to believe it without question. And I've had to start re-questioning my own education and realized I really got the luck of the draw. But did I really? A lot of kids when I was growing up got this luck of the draw and got well educated. Well, I'd say what's happened to education is the focus has changed. And I don't think the focus has been all good in that change. You and I, Jill, have touched on that, I think, on earlier interviews when parents are worried about where to send the kids for college. How do they go somewhere and get a major where they can make the most money? And I was saying, mistake, that's a mistake. That is not why you go to college or get educated, period. The reason you go to college is to develop yourself, your own brain power, and everything that goes with it, namely your mental emotional outlook, your spiritual outlook on life. And you do that through study of scholars, very smart men and women who've asked those questions in prior years. And they shaped our present day universities, many of which are very, very great universities. The universities of the United States are the best in the world. That's why so many people come from China, especially, at least when they're allowed to. I've seen, of course, some things coming out of the White House saying, we have to shut the door on Chinese immigrants, Islamic people from strange places that we don't want in this country. That's a passing phase and a passing fancy. So I'm putting out the word right here. Don't worry about that, because the more you worry about it, it tends to bring it about. But we need the constant connection with all of those different peoples of the world to understand what they know about the world, what they know about education. And I've constantly proven that to myself in the courses I've taught over the years, starting in a high school in Los Angeles County called Duarte High School, just a typical kind of suburban high school. But the kids are very smart, because kids are always smart when they're born and they're in their early years, until something messes them up along the way and distracts them. However, that did not happen with my youngsters at Duarte High School, because I gave them something to counter-distract them by talking about, where did we all come from? Where did this universe come from? So by the time, after a year at the high school, I got a position teaching chemistry at California Polytechnic State University, which is one of those great universities founded in the Polytechnic, namely learn by doing. You go in the laboratory and you actually do experiments and you show yourself how we understand chemicals have certain chemical properties. They have certain physical properties. Why in physics we know about elementary particles? Why in mathematics we have equations that we can use to understand everything from biology to physics through the medium of chemistry? Well, that's what really got going good in the 1940s after World War II, when in their wisdom, the Congress passed the this aid program, the GI Bill, that enabled returning veterans, a couple of million of them, to have government support to go to college. But the government's interest was in bringing them up to speed quickly so that they could be of value to the corporations who would hire them, and that the corporations would not have to start from scratch and teach them everything they needed to know, although they taught them quite a bit. Well, what was happening while the GIs, that means general issue, I don't remember where that came from, but the wives left the household and went to work to maintain industry, because to prosecute the war in Europe and in the Pacific zone, we needed
Rosie
fighting.
was it Rosie the Riveter? What was her name?
Rosie the Riveter was the name.
Loved her and her
And
bandana.
my mother didn't do that, but my stepmom, who was born around 1910, she did. And she worked alongside her husband, who was an engineer, and kept the economy going in the United States. And then when the guys got back from the war, then the women came home and got back to their children.
Wow.
And raising them right, as my mother did, and my stepmom after my mother did. Well, back to the Jerusalem temple. What is that? It goes back to the first temple ever built. And it seemed to be something that was commanded by the high rabbinical councils
Mm-hmm.
of around 1000 BCE. And the son of King David was the one who really got the message. Build a temple, David. So David built this grand structure, and it had a dome, just like a good temple is supposed to have,
Yep.
just like a good planetarium is supposed to have, an astronomical observatory is supposed to have. Now, that's the key to the whole thing. The dome started out with a totally religious purpose, shaped by the scriptures that were interpreted
Yeah.
from the Dead Sea Scrolls and
Wow.
other old scrolls by the rabbinical councils to give counsel. That's what they discovered. These scrolls were describing
Amazing.
something called a God presence or a
Mm-hmm.
creator, and that creator had certain rules that it wanted you to follow to live a good life. And that's what carried us to today and is still carrying us past today. And out of
Yeah.
that came the 10 Commandments and other ethical rules to live by, and a whole lot of challenges because religion split into many subgroups.
Yeah.
But the first big ones were the Eastern Church and the Western Church. And the Western Church was centered in Rome and became the Roman Catholic Church. The Eastern in Constantinople,
Yep.
around present-day Turkey. That was the Eastern Orthodox Church,
Wow.
which stayed in the eastern part of Europe and went on up into Russia. And it's still Christianity. It still had a Christ figure at its center.
Yep.
Somewhere around 500 BCE, the Babylonians got ideas
Oh, wow.
that
Yep.
they needed some of the wisdom that the Jews in Jerusalem possessed.
Yeah.
And so they went and conquered those people. The most sophisticated ones were carried away to Babylon. And those
Yep.
Jewish people stayed in Babylon for maybe another 500 years
Wow.
and eventually got to go back home to Jerusalem and were able to rebuild their culture. That meant rebuilding the temple. So that was the second temple, somewhere in the 500 BCE time zone. And that temple was grand. Well, Solomon's temple was pretty grand, very Roman and Greek in its structure.
Yep.
And then the second temple was even grander. It was huge. It was massive. It must have covered, a couple, 2 or 3 acres under one roof. All right, so that temple actually stood until 70 CE
Oh,
or
my gosh.
AD.
I was like,
as
wait,
we
what's
call
CE
it.
compared to AD? Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that temple
Wow.
was destroyed by the Romans, who
Mhm.
wanted this total control to build their Roman Empire. So again, the Jewish people were kind of sidelined, and it really began their
Yeah.
diaspora with some intent, some great intensity. And so they were scattered about the known world and developed their worship centers of synagogues, but no temple. And so the question got asked by the rabbinical wise men, well,
Mm-hmm.
when are we going to rebuild
Good
and have
question.
the third temple?
Great question.
But there was an argument, well, we really can't have a third temple until we understand the reality of the Messiah. Is the Messiah going to come? Well, see,
Yeah.
that's what split
Mm-hmm.
the Judeo roots from the Christian church, which developed, and
Mm.
that developed with what those Jews considered to be the Messiah, namely Jesus the Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And that founded the Christian church, which I guess there may be 300 or so Christian churches on earth now.
Yeah.
So again, are we going to have a new temple, a third temple?
Yeah.
Well, now the Messiah, to the Christians, said he was coming back. And so there's more people talking about that, more religions now. However, they say we shouldn't build a new temple till the Messiah comes back and gives us more explicit instructions. Now, what you're hearing this morning, Jill, and my friends on the airwaves here, is that the third temple has already been built.
Yes.
It has been in existence for a long time, but it's hard for our traditional Western minds to grasp that.
Yep.
Because we expect it to look like and act like the first and the second temples.
Yeah.
And one has to get a much higher elevation view of reality to recognize, oh, the temple's been back for hundreds of years. And it deals with the same objective of education. Education. If you get out of the specific specializations of different courses and majors and all that, it's easy to see. The principles of morality and ethics have not changed over hundreds, thousands of years. Now, people can get into nitpicks about their particular desires for morality, and I don't get into all those nitpicks. I always look for the big picture, and the big picture is that Galileo was no joke.
Yeah.
When in 1610 he had something he built called a telescope. It was a crude little tube with glass in it in the right places, and he could look out, train that little telescope on the planet Jupiter, and he saw 5 or 6 moons. Well, just these little points of light revolving around that planet. And you could say that Galileo's telescope was a manifestation of the temple, the Jerusalem temple tradition, because it connected us still with the fundamental idea that we worshiped in this universe of a creative force. Now, that creative force has changed its form, and that could fool a lot of us, but I didn't let it fool me. I just kept looking and said, okay, what was next? What was next were some of the structures that were built by some of the great universities. And again, I call it my father's alma mater, Caltech, which built the first big telescope. It was a refracting telescope on the top of Mount Wilson.
Didn't know
which
that.
Overlooks the entire Los Angeles basin.
Okay.
And that's where astronomy was advanced in huge leaps once that observatory, which was a domed structure, just like King Solomon's temple had a domed structure at the center of it. Then what was next? Caltech designed and built the Palomar telescope. Well, Mount Wilson was at 5,700 feet elevation. Palomar was about 7,000 to 8,000 feet elevation, and it was built in Southern California in the mountains above San Diego.
Wow.
And it discovered revolutionary things that had never been seen before. Then what was next? I mean, it was hard to think that there could be anything next after what Palomar discovered.
Yeah.
However, another telescope came along called the Hubble. It was launched around 1990.
I remember that. Yep.
In a rocket. And the Hubble was seeing things that Palomar and Wilson never saw. Or at least if they saw them, Hubble could see it in greater detail because it was above the Earth's surface. It was above all of the dust and the clutter in the atmosphere. And that was only so many years ago. And then what happened in 2021? Christmas Day, this rocket was launched that put what's called the James Webb Telescope out there. And the James Webb Telescope enabled us to see right almost to the beginning of the universe. What does that really mean? It means it had a long enough reach that the things it could see were right at whatever was the wall of the universe, the known universe. These were events that were happening like 12 billion to 14 billion years ago. But the light from them is only reaching us today from
That's
what
crazy.
was going on. When stars were getting formed, galaxies were getting formed. I'm simply telling my friends who are listening, the temple is still with us, the Jerusalem temple. But it doesn't stop there with the telescopes. It goes on to other things like the Los Angeles Planetarium, which was really built for families and children to see this theater on a dome, the inside of the dome structure, and to help these children recognize their relationship to a cosmos that you can't see otherwise. Another example of the temple repeating itself in other manifestations was something in California we call the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
Which was built it was open in 1937. But that bridge is so huge.
Wow.
I mean, the towers are like 750 feet above the water. And then there's the roadbed. My dad was doing homework assignments for his professor at Caltech, who was a construction engineering professor, who was a consultant working on the Golden Gate Bridge. So my dad had the privilege of doing some of the calculations that this professor had to do in order for the engineers to complete that bridge. And so they were just looking at one particular part of the bridge, which had these two towers. And there's the tower at the north end, which is on land. Its base is on the land, north of the gate. And then the south tower, whose base is in the water. And they had to go down like 200 to 300 feet below the surface of this water, which is a mile across at the Golden Gate. And so Dad was working on homework problems on how do you get that water out. So you had to build a coffer dam, which is a dam. It's concrete, but you have to go way down and start building on the bottom of the sea, and finally get it so it reaches all the way up to the surface of the water, and you pump the water out of there so that you can get dry soil at the bottom. And then you send the earth digging equipment down there, and you dig out a place to pour concrete or to the bedrock. And then you put the steel and the concrete on top of that. And that's where you rest this tower, 750 feet tall, made of steel girders and all that. So that was another way that young people were inspired by the awe of what the symbolism of this bridge is, namely something, again, that helps us to appreciate the natural environment and how to take care of it. But that, it doesn't end there. I already mentioned the Los Angeles Planetarium, but now we have to hop to Chicago. And everyone who's ever been to the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry can actually witness with their own eyes a structure
Oh, wow.
that was in the same architecture and grandeur of the Second Temple.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what brought me the inspiration to
Yeah.
say all of this. But that museum was built in the Fine Arts building for the 1893 Columbian Exposition, which was built right there next to Lake Michigan in
Okay.
Hyde Park. But what was built at the opposite end of that museum, up something we call the Midway Plaisance,
Yeah.
that became the campus of the University of Chicago, which was founded around 1891. And so the university is involved in all of this beautiful grandeur of this exposition celebrating the discovery of America by Columbus and the Columbia musician. It was a pretty big world fair.
Yeah.
And we've evolved in our attitudes toward the Columbus discoveries, but we're not going to go into that. We're talking more about the Jerusalem temple. If you look at that today, if you haven't been to Chicago and seen it, it looks practically like the first and the second temples, Jerusalem temples, except the Museum of Science and Industry is 14 acres under one roof
Whoa.
with sub-basements on top of that.
Really?
That is a storehouse,
Huh.
an educational center
Okay.
of science and technology of
Mm-hmm.
the 20th century. All of the technological, whether they're electrical or they're aeronautical or they're energy, whatever they are, they're all there under that roof. And I've been there a few times, and it's just dazzling every time I go in there. But that's part of the energy that hooked up with the University of Chicago
Yeah.
that made the university as great as it became today, that gave me a PhD in physical chemistry. Now, that's the other part of the history, is
Yep.
that the curriculum of that university had to be different because it was in a different place from where the Ivy Leagues were on the Atlantic coast. So when you have all this intense
Oh, wow.
cultural energy
Yeah.
at the south end of Lake Michigan, you have to be something a little different than Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, which are very great universities, except the Manhattan Project happened at the University of Chicago and at Columbia University. What was that? That was about one of the most
Yeah.
dazzling and at the same time frightening events that took
Oh,
place.
yeah.
The breaking apart of the atom, the splitting of the atom to release this tremendous atomic energy,
Wow.
as we call it,
Yeah.
and also many fields of study, quantum physics, atomic molecular physics. All right. So where are we from there? I'll just put this on the table. The Statue of Liberty, although it is not celebrating technology, it is celebrating
Yeah.
freedom and the abolition of slavery. And the French people gave it as a gift to
Mm-hmm.
the American people in celebration of getting over slavery in the United States. So that, let me see what else I have here. I think that's really what I had to say. But that's based on the notes that I have. So who's calling in to
No
ask
one
some
yet.
questions?
No one yet. The lines are open. Don't worry. 631-307-4010. Anyone out there want to give Grant a call? Ask him anything. Doesn't have to be about what he's talking about today. Could be anything. 631-307-4010. Please give us a ring. Grant, you are on a
In
roll
fact,
as always. Oh, go ahead.
many of the things I say on my podcasts have to do with what is contained in my memoir.
Yeah.
That memoir, which is in ebook form, 4 volumes of ebooks that cover the span of my young life all the way up to the present day America and what's happening now. But it's based upon my own ancestors
Mm-hmm.
in the United States and prior to the United States. It's based upon people who were brought on ships from the shores of West Africa over here to work on plantations in America. Also, ancestors who came from Europe to America. I was just thinking about that today, about
Yeah.
reparations. I'm sure everyone has heard about this phenomenon, this proposal called reparations for slavery. And I want to propose that we rephrase that, we reframe that. I want to propose to my countrymen who share my African heritage and some who share my European heritage. The not all of the uh, not all of the plantations were equally brutal, which I've mentioned before.
Yeah.
And through our family records, we knew what life was like, if you can imagine that. Some families actually had records of how their ancestors lived and actually got along with people who owned them. So that suggests another terminology from repairing for damages. In other words, I'm saying, let's turn that around
Sure.
in terms of payments for family that many of the slave descendants had after slavery. Some did, I'm going to use the word okay. Okay meaning they found ways to live, to feed themselves, to shelter themselves.
Oh.
And there was one family that I hope to talk about more later,
Oh.
where, and this happened with other families throughout the border states of
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee, Kentucky, and there were other families in the Deep South where the owners sat down after the Emancipation Proclamation to talk to their servants. And that's the term they generally used on their bonded people who were in bondage, and said, let's talk about this. Let's
Yeah.
talk reality. Reality is there aren't any jobs out there waiting for you to apply for. There's no houses out there sitting there waiting for you to come there and live and be protected from the elements. So let's do what happened with my great grandparents in Missouri, the state of
Wow.
Missouri, one of the border states. And they all agreed, okay, this is a good idea. Now, these were staunch Confederate people who owned my great grandparents. They believed in the ethic, I'll say the ethos of white supremacy. Yet, I have to believe that they also evolved the older that they got, because even in 1865
Yeah.
back to 1830, these people that were the servants became part of the family, the extended family, and they lived together as extended family in the same property between 1865 and around 1910,
Yeah.
when the old colonel passed away. And then his wife lived 8 more years.
Wow.
And she's the one that provided payment for services
Hmm.
provided by her servants over those decades. That's a strange and new way looking at the whole picture. In other words, it's saying, why continue to make
Yeah,
ourselves
right.
miserable with
Yeah,
with the horrible
I get it. I
aspects?
get it.
We have a mind and therefore the mental ability to reframe the whole process. And that's what I did with my
Yeah.
life. Every time I hit an obstacle or barrier, I reframed it
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what are my opportunities. So the widow of the old colonel, in
Mm.
her will, she provided not only for her one son, but for the five children of her son
Yeah.
and other cousins and relatives. But she also provided for the servants for their old age. And my great grandmother was one who was
Wow.
provided for, not knowing that this woman would become the mother of my grandmother, Venerable. And that grandmother would give birth to the first gentleman student, male student of any kind of African ancestry, which was a first for Caltech and a first in all of the major engineering and science schools in the United States. 1932 is my father's graduation date. So out of that came the 2022 naming of one of the major residence halls on the campus after my father, Grant D.
Wow.
Venerable, the senior. And I was just out there, maybe a few weeks ago, um, at a dinner to help further celebrate that achievement. But that's
Yeah,
part, if we can reframe, if we can be that
of
strong
course.
over emotions that cause
Oh,
so
all
much
right, Grant. Hold on.
resentment
We are losing you right now,
against the
but hold on.
process
We do have a caller
of
just coming in. Hold
enslavement.
on one second, Grant. Hi, welcome to the show. You are live on the line with Grant Venerable. Who's this?
Hello, this is Justin. How are you?
Say hi to
Justin?
Justin. Go ahead. Can you hear him?
I'm fine. How
All
are
right, he
you?
hears you good.
Yes. With someone
A little
like
bit.
you, like you have accomplished so much in your life. I know, and during like during this time and this current world event, what can you give advice to somebody right now?
Did you hear that, Grant?
Well, advice for what purpose would you say? I didn't
What?
quite hear
One more
all of
time,
that.
sir. Advice for?
With our current like world events.
Oh, with our current world events, like maybe the fact that like the president just arrested
No.
the president and took him in from Venezuela. More current affairs, Grant. Any interest in sharing your thoughts on that?
Yes, that's on the top of my mind is
Great.
we have
Great.
to reframe the
Yeah.
physical evidence of our physical senses. The
Yeah.
senses are telling us terrible things are happening. This man was taken out of Venezuela
Mm-hmm.
and put in the United States. What can we do about that? We can reframe how we see that in our own minds. That may sound a little abstract, but it isn't. It's how we create our lives. But it first means undoing the Western perception of time, of a past, a future, and a presence,
Mm-hmm.
because there's no such thing.
Okay.
There's only time, space. That
Yeah.
is a determinant out of physics,
Yeah.
astrophysics. What we can do is understand that the future has already occurred and we can harvest its
Yeah.
fruits by claiming that for our own
Mm-hmm.
understanding. We don't have to worry about Congress, the president, the courts, the police, the
Yeah.
banks, or anything else. We have to get that clear that we can reframe the past and the future. So on the one hand, I've just said, in a way, yes, slavery existed, but it did not have to impact my ancestors the way that others feel impacted. The future, on the other hand, all of the good that awaits us in that future has already occurred, and therefore is pulling us through the presence, because the present is the nexus, dividing, unifying line, if there is such a thing, between past and future. Therefore, we're benefiting from the fruits of the future already, even now. All I'm saying is this, Mr. Johnson, is that his name? Your name, sir?
Martinez. Good enough. Yep.
Mr. Martinez. That's a gift of the Creator to be able to do that. You don't have to buy the words that come across the TV or the movie screens or the radio. You create it yourself, which is what my daddy did in getting into college at Caltech. Nobody wanted to see him there. I mean, there were some people that he shouldn't go to Caltech. He's the wrong race. But he was a smart guy who understood mathematics almost better than anybody else in the Western United States. And he, whipped the entrance exam at Caltech. And they said, "Oh, you are so good in math. We're going to admit you just on that strength."
Yeah.
So if Mr. Martinez can begin to focus on his connection to a universe operated, overseen by a creative force and not by despotic elected officials, he gets to win the game of life, because it is only governed by what's up in our minds.
So true.
What we feel.
So true.
What we believe. As soon as you do that, life starts to treat you different. You meet different kinds of people. You meet people that can elevate you to the options that you see possible for you. That cannot control you anymore.
God bless. Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, for the call. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time with our show. So thank you so much for calling and talking a little bit about current events. Again, Grant Venerable, Honorable Doctor, Distinguished Memoirs published, that you can reach out to him. And thank you again for calling. And Grant, why don't you tell us how we can contact you before we go? Thank you.
Well, try Grant Venerable phd.com, all lowercase. And if it isn't working, try again tomorrow, because I have to call up the who's who people that have put up that website. And also, my email is VENTWO, VEN2 at AOL.com. And under subject line, put podcast topic.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Grant. Happy New Year. We will talk next week. Thanks so much. We appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hi, this is Terry Crews, actor, former football player, game show host, father of 5, and all-around big dude. I'm also an expert on drama. I know all kinds of drama. There's the good kind that comes with having a house full of kids. There's the bad kind, like season-ending injuries. There's the necessary kind, like having an agent in Hollywood. And there's silly drama, like the drama around my percolating pectorals. And then there's the drama you can skip.
Skip the drama that comes with not having your high school diploma or equivalency. Find free adult education classes near you and finish your high school diploma. Visit finishyourdiploma.org.
Or text diploma to 97779. Message and data rates may apply. Reply STOP to opt out. That's diploma to 97779. And leave the drama to actors like me.
Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.